Karla Deese is going to share with us just how bad it is. I saw her post on Facebook that said from, I think, 16 to 17, the overdose rate rose 400%. Did you hear that? 400%. That's a heap, y'all. That's a whole heap. But we're going to let Miss Karla come on and do her thing. And there again now, listen to me. This might get graphic to these small children. Now, if you leave them in here, that's your choice. But if they go home and have nightmares, don't say that Biker church. No, that's your choice. I'm giving you the opportunity now to, if you want to let them sit here, let them. But if you don't, personally me, I wouldn't. But that's your choice again. Amen. Now y'all getting on my nerves.
Hey, we got another favorite outside the door.
Oh, God. I ain't dancing and I don't sing.
Ain't what we heard the other day.
What?
Ain't what we heard the other day.
What, me dancing, singing?
Talking about singing.
Oh, no. I might. Every once in a while, but not often.
Good job. We would like for you to set out back and sign an autograph and give all of us an autograph to you. So popular.
Man, hush. You done fell, bump your head. You know what old Kanye tweeted. I told her one day, I said, hello, darling. She said, I know who that is. That's Kanye Tweety. I said, no, honey, Conway. Gotta love these young folk. Amen. Gotta love these young folk. All right, Miss Karla, y'all don't know her. This is Miss Karla Deese. This is the coroner for Lancaster County. Y'all make her welcome.
Thank you. I am very glad to be here tonight. It's always nice to be in your hometown, and I appreciate it. Before I get started, I'm going to introduce a few people that make my job much, much easier. These are the folks that are with me every day and do the really super hard work. So if I can get my crew to stand up, please. Get up. I'm gonna introduce you, so get back up. Scott Walker is one of my transport members. His wife, Lynette, is one of my deputy coroners. John Collins is one of my transport members. His wife, Jennifer, is my administrative deputy coroner. And Brandy is one of my transport members as well. And aside from those folks, I see some faces in here. So Beth, would you stand up? Heather and Tracy, please. Beth and Heather are both, they've been hospice nurses that have worked and called in calls to us. I appreciate y'all for doing that. It's not easy to get out at 3 in the morning and work those death calls. And I know it's not easy for you guys because you get really attached. Tracy, heavy. I appreciate all the years you worked law enforcement with me. You definitely made my job easier. Thank you. So I'm going to just dive right into it. I put on the bottom of this is truly how I feel about everything. Character is how you treat those who can do nothing for you. So I treat, no matter, I don't look for anybody to give me anything. I treat everybody as kind as I can. And that's the way you should do it. So for those of you that don't know me, I live in Kershaw with my husband, 6 dogs, and our inherited niece. I'll explain that one to you. I've been employed with the coroner's office for 12 years, going into my 13th year now. I was the first chief deputy coroner that Lancaster County had. I was elected to the position of coroner in November of 2016. I'm the first female to ever hold this position, and I am currently the first and only person certified through ABMDI, which is a national certification. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it was a very grueling 6 months of studying and a 4-hour test with somebody right in front of the computer looking at me. It was exhausting, but I made it. Passed with a mastery, so I was very excited. This is T-Bone. This is my husband, T-Bone. This is our 4-legged crew. These are our 6. And I'll let you guess which one's the pistol out of the bunch. Not real hard to decide that. And Mr. Regalness up here in the top. All of these are rescues with the exception of the one in the top left, which was T-Bone's when he came into my life. He brought shades with him. All the rest are rescues. Most of them came from death calls where nobody wanted the pets left behind. You know, leave it up to me. That's why I have 6 of them. I can't just leave them there. This is Shelby. This is our inherited niece. Had a friend of mine that died very quickly, unexpectedly, and on her deathbed, she said, "Can you please, please, please take care of Shelby?" Of course. Shelby was a college student at Winthrop at the time. She was 20 years old. I had it made. She also had a son named James and asked another friend of ours and her husband to take care of James, and they signed on to do that. James went to Florida and met his dad and kind of stayed with him for a while and did his thing. Shelby called me on Mother's Day and said, "Can I come stay with you and T-Bone for about 2 weeks till I get new roommates for next semester?" And I said, "Absolutely." That's been 5 years ago. She is still there. Whew, T-Bone and I don't have any children, so you talk about a learning curve. When a 20-year-old comes into your house, you just realize how dumb you are because they'll tell you. No problem. They'll let you know. So just in a nutshell, what does a coroner do? We determine the cause and manner of death and any death not attended by a physician. That's the definition of that. What we do is so much more involved in that. Our investigations are very, very lengthy. They can take hours to days to months, and we have a couple that can take years. The reason we do it is because from death, we learn a lot about living, a lot. So tonight, I'm going to talk to you about addiction. I'm going to talk to you about the ultimate price of addiction. This is one of my favorite slides that I put up because most of the people that pass through my morgue that are deceased from addiction have just spent $20 to get in that casket. I mean, that's what they paid to do that. So do we have a crisis in the United States? Absolutely. Historically, in the United States, motor vehicle accident was the leading cause for accidental deaths in the United States, which makes sense because every day there's cars everywhere, right? Overdose has now taken first place. We have more overdose deaths in the United States than motor vehicle accidents. It is calculated that 59,000 to 65,000 people died from overdoses in 2016. Overdose in Lancaster County, overdose death has exceeded homicide, suicide, and motor vehicle accidents as well. This is just a little graph I like to put up there. It's on the CDC. If any of y'all want to do some extra homework, go to the CDC website and look about the opioid crisis, and you'll see a lot of graphs that will make your head spin. This is the year 2000 right here, and you can just see the sharp rise to 2015. It's just straight up. More Americans died of drug overdoses in 2016 than died in the entirety of the Vietnam War. That should put it in perspective for you. That's 1 year that we're talking about, 2016. The Vietnam War was 19 years, 5 months, 4 weeks, and 1 day. Those are 2016 stats. 2017 is tracking to be way, way higher than that. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about the fastest rising overdose epidemic we face, which is opiates and opioids, from natural to semi-synthetic to synthetic. There was a time, Jennifer's our newest one to the deputy coroner crew. Jennifer's only been there 2 years, well, going on 3 now. Jennifer can even tell you 3 years ago, a lot of our overdoses had cocaine in it. That was one of the high drugs that we would, if anybody tells me I got a cocaine overdose now, I just look at them sideways, because people have gone so far past that now. You know, Lynette, how long has it been since we had a cocaine overdose? A long time, because opiates have just taken the place, just like that. So opiates, opioids, what are we talking about? And I'll kind of go through this one quick. I don't want to drag you in the weeds, because it's very difficult to understand. And I think I got 3 nurses in here, and so those are probably the only 3 that can understand. If I get real deep into this, I won't do you like that. Opiates are natural derivatives, and the way you can remember that is an opiate has a T in it, so does natural. So just connect your T's. Opiates come from natural sources. Some of the types are morphine, codeine, opium. Do we have overdoses with this? Absolutely, all the time. We have overdoses from legitimate prescriptions to improper administration. Where that comes from is people may have a prescription and it says take it every 4 to 6 hours as needed. Somebody takes that and says, I feel pretty good. 2 hours later, they take another one. 2 hours later, they take another one. Those end up stacking on top of each other because they haven't had time to metabolize out of the body. To put that in perspective for you, it's like taking somebody and laying them on the table and putting a cinder block on their chest. They can still breathe. It's probably a little bit heavy, but they can still breathe. Stack 2, stack 3, stack 4. Eventually, they're just not going to breathe. You've stacked too much. It's the same thing that's happening here. People are also opioid naive. Give you an example of that. A legitimate prescription. Somebody may not take painkillers and gets one. Gets a prescription, go home, take it like they prescribe it. It may be too much of a dose for them. So a prime example of that is, how many of you have probably young teenagers that have had some dental work done and got prescribed a pain medication? It's probably happened to some of you. Some of you know that, right? When you get prescriptions from a doctor, one thing they figure in is your weight. How many of you have had your children weighed at the dentist? It doesn't really happen. Nobody, and most of them take a guess at what that dosage should be. But what they're not figuring also is that child is opioid naive. So it's very, very easy. You could easily get overdosed like that. Also, I've talked to a few folks that are in their early 20s. That's where their addiction started. Was from a sprained ankle in a sport, from a dental procedure, from anything like that. It's where their pill addiction started. So you have to be really careful with it. So the opioids are synthetic pain medications, and they can be semi-synthetic as well. Some of the types of those are methadone, Percocet, Percodan, OxyContin, Vicodin, Dilaudid, Demerol, fentanyl. How many of you have heard the word fentanyl a lot lately? A whole lot. This is where it gets a little bit sticky. How many of you have heard of the fentanyl patches? Okay, those are legitimate. Those are prescriptions. A lot of terminally ill folks have the patches. We used to see a lot of abuse on those and overdose from that. People would improperly use them. They would cut them. They would eat them. They would cook them. You name it. Now we have illicit fentanyl. And illicit fentanyl has been made by rogue chemists, and it's just like the regular fentanyl, but it comes in all different forms. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. These overdoses also happen from improper dosing, stacking, opioid naive, and fentanyl patch improper use. A couple of stories from our toxicologist. There was a guy on vacation in Florida, had a fentanyl patch, went out on the beach, was going to enjoy his day off on the beach, and laid out in the sun with a fentanyl patch. You can't add heat to them like that. There was a sharp little lifeguard that noticed his color was turning purple and got him some help. He didn't know that he truly didn't. He wasn't there to abuse him. He just didn't know he couldn't do that. There's another case of a bodybuilder who had the fentanyl patch because he had injured his back severely. He was getting back into bodybuilding. He was doing very well with it. But he was getting frustrated because he was doing so well that he was at a point where he was building up a lot of sweat because he was really getting back on track, and his patch wouldn't stay on. So he got irritated and he duct taped it. And you can't do that either. That speeds the supply up. I put the picture of the dentist because what I told you about, your kids at the dentist. And I'm not here to knock dentists down. That's not what I'm doing at all. It's just something to put on your radar. So how did we develop an addiction to these prescription medications? In the late 80s and early 90s, there was no ceiling amount of pain medication. You could just give it out. That was it. Then it started becoming a problem, and folks recognized it, so they started dialing it back. Once they started dialing it back, that gave way to the street hustle. Then you had people who couldn't get it from the doctors. They were getting it anywhere they could, and you had all the pop-up pain clinics. Then you had folks who might be perfectly healthy go into a doctor and say, I just have back pain. They get a prescription when they're going to sell it. So there was a supply and demand market there all the time. As that kind of faded away, then we had rogue chemists they came in and began to manufacture the illicit fentanyl and chemical cousins to some of these prescription drugs. And they come in all different forms. And everybody's always asked me, so why would a chemist do that? Why wouldn't they? Because they're here and they make a certain amount of money, but they can go to China to some of these illicit clandestine labs and make 10 and 20 times more a year than what they're making here. It's tempting. It's temptation, and they're going to go. So we're going to talk about the illicit opioids being made and causing the spike in deaths. So some of the illicits that we see in our office this is just Lancaster County. So all I'm going to talk about now is us in Lancaster County. U47-700, the street name of it is Pink. It's an illicit opioid, and it's cut with Benadryl. We've had 2 deaths that include Pink. Fentanyl, of course, we've already talked a little bit about the fentanyl. It has a cousin, acetylfentanyl. Gosh, in the last few months, we've identified 2 other new fentanyls right in Lancaster County. It has numerous analogs to it. And then we have carfentanyl. Anybody have a clue what carfentanyl is? Carfentanyl is an elephant tranquilizer. What is the only place in South Carolina allowed to have carfentanyl? The zoo. Carfentanyl is out. It is being made illicitly also. In probably by August, the upstate already had 8 carfentanyl deaths. York County now has a carfentanyl. So if you don't think it's here, it's next door in York County. We have not had one yet, but we hope we don't, but we're not going to be surprised. So again, overdoses happen because of various reasons. Opioid naive, again, that's somebody who doesn't have a tolerance to it. So you have somebody who's maybe a heroin addict and they go to jail. The first thing they do when they get out is do another dose. They die because their body doesn't have tolerance anymore. How quick does an opioid get out of your system? Anybody want to take a guess? Come on with it. 3 days, pretty good guess. So let me tell you about a case that we've kind of been trying to track down. So it's a bit of a caregiver abuse situation. We don't think that they gave the person their hydrocodone at the time they said they did. So the dose was supposed to be given at, we'll say 8 o'clock at night. The person died at 4 in the morning. That's 8 hours. So I called my toxicologist and said, we're about to nail somebody. You know, it's all excited. Jennifer was right there with me, just cheering it on. And our toxicologist said, that's out of there. That's already metabolized. That's gone. That's how fast they can leave your system, which is how quickly people become naive, which is why it's a problem. We've had numerous people that have come out of jail that have died. You can also, there's accidental exposure from families to professionals with these illicits. This is what U-47-700 looks like. It's about 7.5 times more powerful than morphine. That was an interesting reaction because I just caught myself saying it's about 7.5 times. And I'm going to tell you why, because I'm going to give you the rest of how powerful they are, and you'll know why I did that now. This is morphine, this little tiny green one. Heroin is 2 times as strong as morphine. Fentanyl is 100 times stronger is what the graph has. Carfentanil is 10,000 times stronger. That fentanyl that says it's 100 times stronger, it can actually be up to 1,000 times stronger depending on its chemical makeup. So I'm going to take you all the way back down to morphine. What opiates do, whether they're prescription or illicit, they knock out your respiratory drive. You can't breathe. When you go into the hospital and you get put on Dilaudid, morphine, any of those things, when you have a procedure done and you go under anesthesia, a tube is put in your throat. That tube is put in your throat because something has to breathe for you. Because that drug that they gave you medically knocks out your respiratory drive. So all these people on the street are doing these drugs that knock out their respiratory drive, and there's no tube to breathe for them. But that's not how they think. This is just a graphic to show you. This would be a lethal dose of heroin. If that's how much heroin it takes to kill somebody, that's how much fentanyl it would take. And that one little grain is how much it would take of carfentanil. Realistically, the amount of carfentanil it would take to kill you, you can't see. So these are some of the ways that people take these. I won't read the bottom two. We're all adults. You can read it yourself. It's smoked, snorted, injected, ocular through the eye, and orally. The 2 bottom ones, we actually have a case that a man injected himself. I haven't updated to put that on there, but that is the route he used. And we actually have that case. How did all this stuff get here? China and India are the largest source of manufacturing. China has clandestine labs that produce the powder. Then it gets shipped to India where it's pressed into pills, repackaged, etc. China also ships it directly via the dark web and shipped to the United States via cargo. A lot of times people ask me how come customs doesn't stop that. Well, they do. They just can't stop it all, like everything else. Another question was, why don't they have canines? This illicit fentanyl reacts the same on every single living mammal with the exception of a horse. Nobody knows why, but it has a reverse reaction on a horse. But if a canine were to smell this or absorb it through their pads, they're going to die. A lot of the officers who run canine dogs carry NARCAN for them as well. It comes in pills, powders, and potions. So that's what people are pressing now. This is fentanyl pressed. If you look at it long enough, you can probably pick out the differences. But if you're fiending for it and you got $20, are you going to pay that much attention? You just want your fix. So another one, it's a hydrocodone. There's another example of a lethal dose of fentanyl. It's how much fentanyl powder it'll take to kill somebody. This is what's being put into heroin around here. It's cheap. It's a cheap additive, and the dealer is making a ton of money off the user. They're all, you know, somebody said, well, yeah, but they're losing their clients. They are. But I've talked to numerous addicts who are still addicts who have told me when they hear that somebody died from heroin because it had fentanyl, they hit the street and find out who the dealer was because they got the good stuff. They go chase it. They'll risk it. They'll risk dying to have it. This is another way it's injected. It's through nasal spray. They'll dump the contents out, put it in liquid form. How many of you know about NARCAN? Yep. So unfortunately, a lot of families keep NARCAN because they have somebody in their home addicted. It's just a recommendation. I always suggest that you do the nasal version of NARCAN instead of the pen. I'll pick on Brandy now. So if Brandy and I are in the morgue at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm cleaning somebody's pockets out or what have you, and they might have some fentanyl powder, and I start to go down, and Brandy's scared of needles, I'm not in good shape because Brandy's probably not going to give me my dose of NARCAN. So people are scared of needles, but nobody's really scared to shoot a mist up your nose. So that's one reason I always say, if you're going to have it, go for the mist. Remember, one dose is never enough. Never. That gives you enough time to call 911 and hit more doses till you run out. They're going to come up fighting mad because you ruined their buzz and wasted their $20. You may as well go ahead and get ready. They will come up swinging. None of them. I have yet to see one come up and say, you just saved my life, thank you. They will come up ready to kill you. They are so mad. We see it in the hospital. Unfortunately, we'll be in one room working a death of any kind. It just may be a natural, good, long life lived. Next door to us, they'll bring in an overdose. You know when the NARCAN has hit because they will tear that room apart, ready to fight. They are so mad. That's the kind of grip it has on people. There's nothing any more important than it, I guarantee you. Methadone, I know a lot of people who have used methadone. It's designed to wean you off. Haven't seen that many folks successful. I'll be honest with you. I see people on methadone. It's just a secondary for them. That's all. There's a new thing out. It's poor man's meth, and I'm not here to instruct you on how to do it, but there is a version out there. You can combine grapefruit juice, Tagamet, and Imodium, and it's a certain formula, and you do it a certain way, and it produces the same effect as methadone. You can't catch it when people come in the ER, so again, my 3 nurses will get it. But you go into the ER and you have a prolonged QT interval in your heartbeat. You have this weird prolonged part. Nobody knows why. So you got doctors chasing down all these cardiac problems where there's nothing wrong with their heart. This combination causes that. But they are, for 1 minute, not going to say, well, I was doing poor man's methadone. And there is no toxicology test for that either. So now I'm going to tell you, the next time y'all are out, and I haven't checked Kershaw to see if they do it, most of the Dollar Generals have now pulled the Imodium pills, and you have to get the little card and get it because they're getting stolen so much for this. So next time y'all are in Dollar Generals, just kind of cruise around and look. Most of them have taken that. So who's affected? Opioid abuse knows no age, race, or socioeconomic background. Our oldest one is 57 and our youngest is 16. Our 57-year-old, a lot of people say, God, why would you be 57 and still doing that? I got two theories on that. Number one, our 57-year-olds are in the baby boomer group. Most of those lived a pretty exciting life in the 60s and 70s. And a lot of them hadn't slowed down. The other thing with them, and I told this to my toxicologist, and she said she was going to get a shirt made with it. When you get a prescription bottle, it says PRN, which means as needed. And, you know, I told you earlier that people don't take them as needed. They just take them. And I told my toxicologist, I said, I am at my wit's end because everybody that gets something that says PRN thinks that stands for party right now. And she said, I'm getting a shirt made with that. And that's kind of that mentality. And, of course, you know, you're 16, early teens, they're experimenting. And unfortunately, they're getting stuff on the web. They don't even know what they're getting, but they'll try it. So I'll back up and let me tell you about the NARCAN right now. We haven't had it around here, but in Monroe, another guy that I partner with up there, they have NARCAN parties up there, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. All of the teenagers are taking something, an opiate or an opioid, until they almost go all the way out and have somebody NARCAN. They want to see how that feels. That's a very, very common thing. So in 2016, I have 5 related opioid deaths, 5 overdoses on opioid. None of them had fentanyl, none. 2017 closed out with 25, and 18 of them had fentanyl. It is here, folks. It is here. That is a 400% increase. So if Little Lancaster County, with about 90,000 people, has a 400% increase, you know what Columbia, Greenville, Charleston's looking like. I have very good friends with all of those coroners, and they are swamped. They just cannot get ahead of themselves, especially Charleston because it's a tourist destination. It's terrible. This was a graph that the Lancaster paper did, and I probably just need to take it out because they still had us at 17. We passed that by a long shot. So how do our numbers break down in our overdoses in the 25 that we've had? 8 of them were female, 17 were male. The average age is 40. This was 38 till our last 3 came in. The average age was 38, now it's 40. The most common age of our folks that have died have been 38. 5 of them were in their 50s, 6 were in their 40s, 9 were in their 30s, 4 were in their 20s, 1 was still in the teens. So the aftermath, we got numerous children in this state dying from exposure, simply from touch, airborne exposure, breastfeeding, and sadly intentional administration. So let's talk about some touch. We got kids crawling around on carpet, pulling up on tables where folks are in there fixing heroin with fentanyl in it, and they're absorbing this and they're dying from it. airborne. It's in the air in the house. It's killing them left and right. Breastfeeding. Unfortunately, you got mothers who give birth, breastfeed, still do these drugs. That drug goes straight to that infant, straight to them. And then sadly, you've got intentional. You've got folks who live that lifestyle who don't have time for children to be in their way. And they'll put it in their bottles, they'll put it in their sippy cups, and they'll kill them. It's our job to find that. Yep. So you never know where residue can be found, because now we have a current trend where addicts are shooting up in public places because now they know that there's fentanyl. They know that their risk of dying is a whole lot higher. So the next time you go in a restaurant, if you go in and somebody's shot up in the bathroom, don't be surprised. They're going to go in there and shoot up in the hopes that if they do go unconscious, somebody's going to find them before they die and call for some help. So this is very common. I did this same talk in Lancaster, I think it was back in August, and a lady was there who worked at Joe Mars, and she said, we had that happen today. Well, I wasn't going to say that out loud, but we sat in the office and listened to that call that day. So we knew that that had all happened that day. But, so, I mean, it happens. It happened right there in Lancaster. So almost every scene that we go on, folks know that their family member has an addiction issue. But they don't want to be embarrassed. Sometimes they don't want to tell us because they think they're going to be in trouble. And so you may have a mother who has a child, let's say a 25-year-old addict that lives with her. She finds him dead. Before she calls us, she goes in and, you know, she's cleaning up everything. Easily die, easily. We haven't had any in Lancaster County. There have been plenty of what we call the cleaners that have died from exposure. I'll tell it because she tells it publicly. Delois Carpenter had a son who was addicted, and Delois said every time he would go in the bathroom, that anger, you know, because she knew what was going on, and she said, I'd walk in there after he got done, and I'd just to see. She said, I could have dropped dead any minute. And I said, you're lucky you didn't. You are very lucky you didn't. So when does 1 + 1 = 5? This goes back to that stacking that I was talking about. And also people add alcohol to that. They add numerous other things. You put 3 things together, 1, 1, and 1, now doesn't equal 3 anymore. It equals like a 5 or a 6. Almost every time I get almost wrapped up at one of these talks, I see that look from certain people, and they're just like, it's a good talk, but not my kid. That is so common. And these are the reasons why they tell me it'll never be their kid. Because I talk to my children, I know everything they do. Okay? I'm going to tell y'all right here, right now, my daddy was military. He was extremely tough on us, very, very strict. Oh, I won't call which one of my brothers' name, but one of my brothers, he broke his nose and never touched him because he could chew you out and you just beg him to beat you instead of chew you out. It was that bad. As scared as we were of him, you think he knew everything we did? No. I see one back here. David grew up with me, and David will tell you how tough my daddy was. But we didn't tell him everything, and he didn't know everything about us. So that's the most absurd statement I've ever heard. I don't allow my children to hang around with those kind of people. If you can identify that now, somebody needs to show me, because it is the face of a drug addict now is not what it used to be. Not. It could look just like this. It could look just like you on the front row, or you, anybody. That the face is not what you think anymore. My child would have never gotten into drugs if he or she hadn't met so-and-so. Now, I promise you, I get this one a lot. I had people, after I read this, I had a woman come up to me and say, well, that's exactly what happened to my daughter. I'm telling you, if it wasn't for that old boyfriend of hers, I've heard that 100 times. Listen, I've been around good and bad people. I still got people that might be questionable that I associate with. I could care less what they do because I cut my own path. You know, and if you don't have that backbone, it's not their fault. That's your fault. They get really, really creative, and you got to be super savvy. You got to know the game. I got a really good friend of mine that goes through some of these things. Can I have money to pay my power bill? And nobody wants their child or grandchild to be without power, so everybody gives up money. And then they get smart and say, I'm not going to give you cash. You know, I'll go pay your power bill. Well, they let them because that frees up some more money for them. It's not a problem. I've run out of diapers. That always, always gets a grandparent. They'll buy it. I've run out of gas and I need to go to the doctor. That's a good one. That'll get money. I need money for food. I don't have any food. That kind of tugs on everybody's heartstrings. And this is my favorite. After all this has been run through and somebody finally says, I know the game. Don't believe any of those. Then they wait. They sit and simmer for a little bit. And then they come up with this. I know I did you wrong, but I'm going to prove myself. I don't want any money. I know you still think I'm using, but I'm clean, and I'm going to prove it. I do need a few things for the kids. That's all. Thing of diapers, thing of wipes, and some juice. That's all I need. If you'll take me and you buy it for me, I'm not going to meet you there. You take me. And they say, okay. Take them, go to the store, buy the things they need. Often get so reeled in, they buy them a couple extra things. Take them home. You got the son or daughter at the door and say, thank you, I really appreciate it. You know, thank you. That's why I'm not going to ask you for money, I'm approved. So the grandparent drives off, thrilled. As soon as they drive off, that person goes right back out the door with the bags and the receipt and returns it. Got the money. It's that easy. So stay up to date, stay educated, learn the warning signs, be active. And the hardest part, don't enable. That is the hardest part. Don't enable them. I spoke to a group in Pageland, and there were a lot of folks who were just blown away the first 3 minutes. I lost them. I knew I'd lost them. And I got a lot of those, nobody in my family, because my son's a doctor and his children are lawyers, and I got those looks. And I said, so what if none of that applies to you that I talked about? None of it. Let's say you do have the perfect family and nobody's ever had an issue. That's great. Do you still think it doesn't apply to you? Yeah, it didn't apply to me at all. How'd you get here tonight? Did you drive? Did you walk? Anything on that roadway, you've already been exposed. Because there was somebody under the influence that met you on the road. You just got lucky and made it here. If you don't believe that, I'll tell you this. There is a road in Lancaster that had 5 deaths. Was it 5 or 7? 7 in 1 year. And there was a public cry to fix the potholes. This was ridiculous because it was a rough road, and it was very rough. They did some petitions, some online Facebook outcries about how nasty the road was, and I've been up and down that road, and it's horrible. I couldn't agree more. What nobody did was pick up the phone and call the coroner's office. All 7 of them were under the influence of drugs. That's what caused them to wreck, not pothole. So they're on the road every day with you. So I'm just going to finish up tonight with, we call it nerd knowledge, because there's no fun fact in our office. But just to give you kind of an idea of what we do every day, just besides this. And these go from January of last year just through August. There were in those 8 months, there were 329 death cases processed. 290 were natural, 27 were accidental. At that time, 17 of them were drug overdoses, 5 homicides, 6 suicides. 1 was undetermined. That one's now been moved up to accidental. 67 were autopsies, 78 were cancer-related, 146 were cremated. In those 8 months, we put in 5,449 case hours. The day of the week with the highest rate of death in Lancaster County is Wednesday. The lowest is Friday. We're in good shape tonight. Thus far, the month with the highest number of deaths has been June. The lowest was August. The city in which the death occurred or precipitated from highest to lowest was Lancaster, Indian Land, Kershaw, Heath Springs, and then Van Wyck. The fire district with the highest number was City Fire, and the lowest was Belltown and Unity. The youngest victim we worked was 2, and the oldest was 104. Fire away. Go ahead. I am so glad, because every time I say that, everybody sits there and looks, and then I might get this. That came up like a rocket. I'm going to be as honest as I can. I can't get past this yet to get to the Tide Pods. I don't know. It's kind of like the cinnamon challenge and all those other dumb things. I don't know. Yeah. I don't have a clue. I can't answer that, just like I can't answer